London, 1845. Catherine Northcott stood motionless before the floor-length mirror in her bedchamber, watching as her lady's maid fastened the last pearl button at the back of her gown. The pale blue silk rustled softly with each breath she took. Outside, rain lashed against the windows of Northcott House, matching her stormy mood. "There you are, Miss Catherine," said Mary, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "You look beautiful." Catherine studied her reflection with detachment. At 23, she was no longer the fresh-faced debutante who had once dreamed of a brilliant London season. 5 years had passed since her mother's death, and in that time she had faded from society's notice entirely, precisely as her father had intended. "Beautiful or not, it hardly matters," Catherine murmured. "No one will see me." Mary's face fell. "But your father has invited guests this evening." "Business associates, no doubt, men who will not spare a glance for the forgotten daughter of the house." Catherine turned away from the mirror, her fingers tracing the leather-bound volume of poetry on her dressing table. "Do not fret, Mary. I have made my peace with invisibility." It was a lie, of course. One could never truly reconcile oneself to being erased. Once, she had been Catherine Northcott, beloved daughter and heiress to her father's shipping fortune. Now she was merely a shadow in her own home, valued only for the marriage alliance she might secure. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Catherine," called the butler from the corridor. "Your father requests your presence in his study immediately." Catherine exchanged a puzzled glance with Mary. Her father, Edwin Northcott, rarely sought her company except to criticize her continued spinsterhood or her excessive reading habits. "Thank you, Parker. Tell him I shall be there directly." As she made her way down the grand staircase, Catherine's mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps her half-sister Lydia was visiting from Scotland. Or maybe father had purchased another property and required her assistance with the household inventories, the only task for which he ever seemed to value her organizational skills. The heavy oak door to her father's study stood ajar. She hesitated before knocking softly. "Enter," came her father's brusque voice. Catherine stepped inside, immediately noting the thick cloud of cigar smoke and the presence of a stranger, a corpulent, red-faced man perhaps twice her age, who rose unsteadily from his chair when she appeared. "Ah, here she is," her father said without warmth. "Catherine, may I present Lord Reginald Berkeley, Earl of Westhaven." The Earl's small eyes swept over Catherine with such naked assessment that she fought the urge to cover herself with her arms. "Exquisite," Lord Berkeley declared, as if appraising a mare at auction. "Just as you described, Northcott. A bit older than ideal, but with those eyes and that figure, I dare say she'll do nicely." Catherine's stomach clenched. "Father, what is the meaning of this?" Edwin Northcott cleared his throat, not quite meeting his daughter's gaze. "Lord Berkeley has done me the honor of offering for your hand, Catherine. The wedding will take place in 6 weeks' time." The room seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "I beg your pardon." "You heard correctly, girl. It's time you were settled. Lord Berkeley has extensive holdings in Yorkshire and London. You'll want for nothing. Except perhaps a good night's sleep," the Earl chuckled, patting his protruding belly. "I'm told I snore something fierce." Catherine stared at her father in disbelief. "May I speak with you privately?" "There's nothing to discuss. The arrangements have been made." "The arrangements?" She struggled to keep her voice steady. "For selling your daughter to clear your debts, you mean?" Lord Berkeley's jovial expression hardened. "Mind your tongue, girl. That's no way to address your future husband." "You are not, nor will you ever be, my husband, sir." Catherine turned back to her father, who was now pouring himself another brandy, his hand trembling slightly. "Father, I implore you. Whatever financial troubles you face." "Enough!" Edwin slammed his glass down, amber liquid sloshing onto polished mahogany. "Your sister had the good sense to marry where she was bid. You will do the same." Lord Bartley has generously offered to overlook your advanced age and lack of accomplishments. You should be grateful. Grateful, Catherine's voice dropped to a whisper, for being bartered like cattle. The marriage settlements have been drawn up, her father continued, as if she hadn't spoken. Lord Bartley has already advanced a portion of your dowry to assist with certain pressing matters. And there it was, the truth laid bare. Her father had already spent money he didn't have, using his daughter as collateral. Catherine looked between the two men, one bloated with excess, the other hollowed by greed, and a cold certainty settled in her heart. I refuse. Her father's face darkened. You have no choice. There is always a choice. She lifted her chin. I am 23, not some schoolroom miss. I will not marry this man. Lord Bartley pushed himself to his feet, jowls quivering with indignation. See here, Northcott. You assured me she was biddable. And she will be, her father growled, advancing toward Catherine. You forget yourself, daughter. You have no fortune of your own, no prospects, nothing but what I provide. Defy me in this, and you will find yourself on the street with nothing but the clothes on your back. Then I shall wear them proudly. Catherine backed toward the door. Better poverty with dignity than wealth with such a husband. She fled the study before either man could respond, heart pounding against her ribs. In her chamber, she rang frantically for Mary. Pack only what I cannot live without, she instructed the wide-eyed maid. We must be quick. I am leaving tonight. Leaving, but Miss Catherine, where will you go? Where indeed? She had no close friends, no relatives who would defy her father. But there was one possibility, distant, tenuous, yet her only hope. To my godmother in Derbyshire, Catherine decided. Lady Helena Andrews wrote after mother died, offering her home should I ever need sanctuary. I pray that offer still stands. Within an hour, Catherine had changed into her plainest travelling dress, packed a small valise with essential items, and written a brief note to her father. She left the house through the servants' entrance, a hooded cloak concealing her face, and hailed a hackney cab in the rain-slicked street. Euston Station, she instructed the driver, clutching her meagre savings in a drawstring purse. As the carriage pulled away from the only home she had ever known, Catherine did not look back. There was nothing to see there but the ghost of the girl she had been, a girl who believed in a father's love and protection. That girl was gone now, replaced by a woman who understood at last that in this world, a woman without fortune or beauty extraordinary enough to compensate for her lack was nothing more than currency in men's transactions. Never again, she whispered to the darkness beyond the carriage window. Never again will I allow myself to be valued only for what a man might gain from me. The northbound train departed London amid billowing steam and the shrill cry of the whistle. Catherine settled into a second-class compartment, clutching her ticket to Matlock, the nearest station to her godmother's estate. Exhaustion washed over her as the rhythm of the rails lulled her into uneasy sleep. She dreamed of her mother's face, growing ever more indistinct with the passing years, and of the life that might have been hers had Elizabeth Northcott lived. Would her father have dared to barter his daughter if his wife still breathed? Somehow, Catherine thought not. Her mother had possessed a quiet strength that had tempered Edwin Northcott's mercenary nature. Dawn was breaking when the train finally lurched into Matlock Station. Catherine descended stiffly, her cramped limbs protesting after the long journey. The station was nearly deserted at this early hour, with only a sleepy porter and a single gentleman awaiting the southbound train. "Excuse me," she approached the porter. "How might I secure transportation to Thornfield Hall? It's the residence of Lady Helena Andrews." The porter scratched his chin. "That's a good 8 miles from here, miss. You'd best hire the dogcart from the station master." The fare would deplete her remaining funds significantly, but there was no alternative. Catherine arranged for the transport, then waited in the small tea shop adjacent to the station, nursing a cup of weak tea to warm her chilled hands. When the dogcart arrived, Driven by a weathered man with kind eyes, Catherine felt her first flicker of hope. "Thornfield Hall, if you please," she said, climbing up beside him. "Visiting the old lady, are you?" the driver asked as they set off down a winding country road. "Yes, I'm her goddaughter." "Ah, well, you're in for a surprise then, miss." The man clucked to his horse. "Lady Helena passed on near 2 years ago. The property belongs to her nephew now, the Duke of Ashbourne." Catherine's heart sank like a stone. "Lady Helena is dead." "Afraid so, miss. Went peaceful in her sleep, they say." "His Grace kept all her staff on, though. Decent of him, that was." Catherine barely heard the rest of the driver's chatter as they travelled through the mist-shrouded Derbyshire landscape. Her one hope of sanctuary had vanished. She had no acquaintance with the Duke of Ashbourne, no claim on his charity. What was she to do now? The dogcart rounded a bend, and Thornfield Hall came into view, a handsome stone manor house nestled among ancient oaks, smaller than she had imagined but elegant in its proportions. "Here we are, miss," the driver announced, drawing up before the entrance. "Shall I wait?" Pride warred with practicality in Catherine's breast. If the Duke refused to receive her, she would need transportation back to the village. "Yes, please," she decided, "just for a short while." Catherine approached the door with trepidation, straightening her travel-wrinkled gown before lifting the brass knocker. A moment later, the door swung open to reveal an elderly butler with impressive side whiskers. "Good morning," she began, mustering her courage. "My name is Catherine Northcott. Was Lady Helena's goddaughter. I wonder if I might speak with His Grace, the Duke of Ashbourne." The butler's expression remained impassive. "His Grace is not at home to visitors at present, Miss Northcott." "Oh," Catherine's shoulders sagged. "I see. It's just that I've come a very long way, and I find myself in somewhat desperate circumstances. Lady Helena once offered me shelter, you see, and I had hoped." She trailed off, mortified to feel tears threatening. Something in the butler's stern countenance softened fractionally. "Perhaps you would care to wait in the morning room, Miss Northcott, while I inquire whether His Grace might make an exception." Relief flooded through her. Thank you so much." Catherine followed the butler through a high-ceilinged entrance hall into a charming room overlooking the gardens. The furnishings were elegant but comfortable, with cheerful yellow drapes framing the windows and fresh flowers adorning the mantelpiece. "Please be seated, Miss Northcott." "I shall return shortly." The butler bowed and withdrew, closing the door quietly behind him. Left alone, Catherine sank gratefully into an armchair, suddenly aware of every ache in her body from the long journey. What would she say to the Duke? How could she possibly explain her situation without revealing her father's shameful conduct? And what if the Duke refused her plea for assistance? Her anxious thoughts were interrupted by the opening of the door. Catherine rose hastily, expecting the butler's return. Instead, a tall figure filled the doorway, a man in his early 30s, broad-shouldered and commanding in his presence, dressed not in formal attire but in riding clothes, as if he had just returned from the stables. "Miss Northcott, I presume?" His voice was deep, with the cultured accent of aristocracy, but lacking the affected drawl she associated with London society. Catherine curtsied, pulse quickening. "Yes, Your Grace. Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Alexander Everett, Duke of Ashbourne." He inclined his head slightly, studying her with eyes of such intense blue they seemed to pierce straight through her carefully composed facade. "My butler informs me you are my aunt's goddaughter and find yourself in some distress. Please be seated and explain what brings you to Thornfield at this early hour." Catherine resumed her seat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I apologize for arriving unannounced, Your Grace. I was unaware of Lady Helena's passing. She was a dear friend of my mother's, and some years ago, after my mother died, she wrote offering me a home should I ever need one." She hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. "And now you need one," the Duke observed, taking the chair opposite her. "Why?" Direct, almost brusque. Catherine hadn't expected such bluntness from a man of his station. "My father intends to force me into an unsuitable marriage," she said carefully. "I had no choice but to leave." "Unsuitable how? The gentleman lacks fortune, title, or perhaps character." "The latter primarily," Catherine answered. "Lord Berkeley is known for his excesses, and he is old enough to be my father." The Duke's expression darkened. "Reginald Berkeley, the Earl of Westhaven. You know him by reputation. You were wise to refuse him." He leaned forward slightly. "But I suspect there is more to this story, Miss Northcott. Your father could hardly force you to the altar against your will. The law, at least, would protect you from that." Catherine looked down at her clasped hands. "My father made it clear that if I refused the match, I would no longer be welcome in his home. Lord Berkeley has already advanced him a portion of the dowry to settle certain debts." "I see." The single syllable contained volumes of understanding. "So you fled rather than submit to what amounts to a business transaction with your virtue as the commodity." Catherine's head snapped up at his plain speaking. "Yes, Your Grace, that is precisely what I did." Something like approval flashed in his eyes. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Northcott, perhaps both. I prefer to think of it as self-preservation." A ghost of a smile touched the Duke's mouth before vanishing. He rose and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back, presenting a striking silhouette against the morning light. "My aunt would have welcomed you without hesitation," he said after a moment. Helena had a soft spot for women in difficult straits. Her own marriage was less than ideal. "I had no idea," Catherine murmured. "Few did." She maintained appearances admirably. He turned to face her again. "I cannot, in good conscience, turn away my aunt's goddaughter when she clearly extended an invitation of sanctuary. You may remain at Thornfield as my guest until you determine your next course of action." Relief nearly overwhelmed her. "Your Grace, I cannot express my gratitude adequately. I promise I shall not impose upon your hospitality for long." "This is not charity, Miss Northcott," he said firmly. "Consider it honoring my aunt's wishes. Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, will show you to a suitable chamber. I suggest you rest after your journey. We can discuss your situation further this evening." With that, he strode to the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. "One condition, Miss Northcott." "Yes." "Complete honesty between us. I will not tolerate deception, even by omission." Catherine met his penetrating gaze steadily. "I understand, Your Grace. And I accept your condition." He nodded once, then departed, leaving Catherine to wonder what manner of man had just granted her refuge, and whether she had merely exchanged one perilous situation for another. The chamber to which Mrs. Winters conducted her was modest but comfortable, with a view of the rolling hills beyond Thornfield's gardens. For the first time since fleeing her father's house, Catherine allowed herself to truly breathe. She was safe, at least temporarily. After a hot bath and change of clothes, her travel-worn gown replaced by a simple day dress from her valise, Catherine succumbed to exhaustion, falling into a dreamless sleep atop the coverlet. She woke disoriented hours later to find afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows and a tray of food on the small writing desk. A note propped against the teapot read, "Miss Northcott, His Grace requests your company in the library at 7 o'clock this evening. Mrs. Winters." Catherine ate ravenously, realizing she hadn't had a proper meal since leaving London. Afterward, she unpacked her few belongings and attempted to make herself presentable for dinner with her enigmatic host. At precisely 7 o'clock, she descended the stairs, following the butler's directions to the library. The door stood ajar, warm light spilling into the corridor. She knocked lightly. "Enter," called the Duke's voice from within. Catherine stepped into a magnificent room lined with bookshelves stretching from floor to ceiling, interrupted only by tall windows and a massive stone fireplace. The Duke stood before the fire, still dressed in day clothes rather than dinner attire, a book in one hand and a glass of amber liquid in the other. "Miss Northcott," he acknowledged, setting aside both book and glass. "I trust you found your accommodation satisfactory." "More than satisfactory, Your Grace. Thank you." "Good. I've taken the liberty of arranging a simple dinner here, rather than the formality of the dining room." He gestured to a table near the windows, already set for two. "I thought you might prefer a more private setting for our conversation." Catherine nodded, grateful for his consideration. "That was most thoughtful." As they took their seats, Catherine found herself studying the Duke surreptitiously. In the candlelight, his features were less severe than they had appeared that morning, strong, certainly, with a square jaw and aquiline nose, but not without warmth in the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. The first course was served by a footman who appeared and disappeared with silent efficiency. Once they were alone again, the Duke spoke. "I've been considering your situation, Miss Northcott. You face a dilemma common to many women of good family but insufficient fortune: how to maintain independence without surrendering to an unsuitable marriage or descending into poverty." "You have a remarkable grasp of the problem, Your Grace," Catherine replied, somewhat taken aback by his directness. "My aunt educated me well on the plight of gentlewomen with few options." He paused. "Tell me, what skills do you possess? Are you accomplished in music, languages, drawing?" Catherine considered her answer carefully. "I read and speak French and Italian passably well. My musical abilities are limited to basic proficiency at the pianoforte. I draw rather poorly." She hesitated. "However, I have managed my father's household since my mother's death, including accounts and correspondence. I am well read and have a good head for figures." "Practical skills rather than ornamental ones," the Duke observed. "Refreshing. But not particularly marketable," Catherine added with a touch of bitterness. "A gentleman's daughter isn't supposed to need employment. And yet here you are, having chosen potential destitution over a wealthy but detestable husband." "I would make the same choice again." The Duke studied her with those penetrating blue eyes. "I believe you would." He took a sip of wine. "My aunt's companion died several months ago. The position remains unfilled." Catherine's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Your aunt's companion, but Lady Helena has passed," understanding dawned. "You're offering me employment." "I am. My widowed sister, Lady Harrington, resides here with her young daughter. She requires a companion, someone to assist with correspondence, manage her social calendar, and occasionally serve as chaperone for my niece, who at 16 is not yet out but requires guidance." Catherine carefully set down her fork. "You would employ your aunt's goddaughter as a companion. Would that not be awkward given my connection to Lady Helena?" "On the contrary, it provides a natural explanation for your presence here that will satisfy the curiosity of neighbors without revealing your true circumstances." His expression grew serious. "Unless, of course, you find the idea of employment beneath your dignity." "Not at all," Catherine hastened to assure him. "I am in no position to be proud, Your Grace, and honest work is always preferable to dependency." "Then it's settled." He signaled for the next course. "You will receive a modest salary and have comfortable accommodations. In return, you will assist my sister and conduct yourself with the discretion expected of someone in your position." "And when your sister no longer requires my services?" "Cross that bridge when you come to it, Miss Northcott. For now, you have sanctuary and a purpose." Catherine inclined her head. "Then I accept with gratitude, Your Grace." "Excellent. You'll meet Lady Harrington tomorrow. For tonight, consider yourself simply a guest." The remainder of dinner passed in surprisingly easy conversation. The Duke proved knowledgeable on a wide range of subjects, from literature to politics, and seemed genuinely interested in Catherine's opinions. By the time she retired to her chamber, Catherine felt more at ease than she had in years. Perhaps, she thought as she prepared for bed, this unexpected turn of events might prove fortunate after all. At Thornfield, she could establish herself as a woman of independence and worth. She would never again allow herself to be valued merely for her potential as a wife, particularly not by a man like Alexander Everett, whose penetrating gaze unsettled her in ways she dared not examine too closely. The following weeks unfolded with a rhythm and purpose Catherine found deeply satisfying. Lady Sophia Harrington proved to be a pleasant, if somewhat frivolous woman in her early 30s, still beautiful despite the strain of widowhood. Her daughter, Clara, was a spirited girl who delighted in literature and possessed a keen mind that reminded Catherine of herself at that age. As companion, Catherine's duties were varied but never onerous. She organized Lady Sophia's correspondence, assisted with the household accounts, and accompanied both mother and daughter on calls to neighboring estates. The role afforded her a degree of autonomy she had never experienced in her father's house, along with the dignity of earning her keep. The Duke himself was often absent, attending to business in London or visiting his other properties. When in residence at Thornfield, he maintained a polite distance, treating Catherine with the correct blend of courtesy and reserve appropriate to her position. Yet she often felt his eyes upon her during family dinners, assessing, measuring, as if trying to solve some puzzle she presented. One rainy afternoon, nearly a month after her arrival at Thornfield, Catherine sat in the library, helping Clara with her Italian translation. The girl had just mastered a particularly difficult passage when the library door opened, admitting the Duke and a fashionably dressed gentleman Catherine had never seen before. "Forgive the interruption," the Duke said, looking momentarily surprised to find the library occupied. "Clara, Miss Northcott, may I present Lord James Hartley, an old friend from university days." Catherine rose and curtsied, noting the appreciation that flared in Lord Hartley's eyes as they swept over her figure. "A pleasure, Miss Northcott," he said with a bow. Ashbourne failed to mention he had such a charming addition to his household. "Miss Northcott is my sister's companion," the Duke clarified, his tone cooling perceptibly. "And my late aunt's goddaughter." "Indeed, how fortunate for all concerned." Lord Hartley's smile did not quite reach his eyes. "Perhaps Miss Northcott would honor us with her presence at dinner this evening. I should greatly enjoy further conversation." Before Catherine could respond, the Duke spoke. "Miss Northcott dines with the family, of course. Clara, I believe your mother was asking for you." The girl reluctantly gathered her books and departed, leaving Catherine feeling suddenly exposed under the appreciative gaze of Lord Hartley and the increasingly thunderous expression of the Duke. "If you'll excuse me, Your Grace, my lord," she murmured, moving toward the door. "Actually, Miss Northcott," the Duke said, "a moment of your time, if you please. James, I'll join you in the billiards room shortly." Lord Hartley withdrew with obvious reluctance, closing the door behind him. Catherine turned to face the Duke, unsettled by the storm gathering in his expression. "Is something amiss, Your Grace?" "I would advise caution around Lord Hartley," he said without preamble. "His reputation with women is not entirely savory." Catherine stiffened. "I assure you, I have no interest in attracting his attention." "Nevertheless, you have done so." The Duke paced to the window and back. "Hartley is not a man to be trusted, particularly with a woman in your unique position." "My position as a companion, you mean? Or my position as a woman who fled an unwanted marriage?" Catherine couldn't keep a trace of bitterness from her voice. "Rest assured, Your Grace, I am well aware that my circumstances make me particularly vulnerable to men with dishonorable intentions." The Duke's jaw tightened. "I meant no offense, Miss Northcott. I merely wished to warn you." "And I appreciate the warning," she replied, softening her tone. "Truly, but you need not fear that I shall forget my place or my obligations to your family." "Your place?" He looked genuinely puzzled. "That is not my concern." "Then what is?" He hesitated, then said simply, "Your safety. Hartley is not what he seems." Something in his voice, an undercurrent of anger mixed with concern, sent an unexpected warmth through Catherine's chest. "Thank you for your concern, Your Grace. I shall be on my guard." He nodded, seeming relieved. "Good, that's good." He cleared his throat. "I should join Hartley before he wonders what's become of me." As he reached for the door, Catherine spoke again. "Your Grace, may I ask a question?" He turned back, one eyebrow raised. "Of course." "Why did you really offer me employment? You could have simply provided temporary shelter while I sought a position elsewhere." The Duke studied her face for a long moment. "Because you remind me of my aunt," he said finally. She too had the courage to forge her own path despite the constraints society placed upon her. A shadow crossed his features. "And because I recognized in you someone who values freedom above security, a quality I've found increasingly rare." With that, he departed, leaving Catherine to wonder at the complexity of a man who seemed at once so formidable and so unexpectedly perceptive. The evening proved challenging. Throughout dinner, Lord Hartley directed his attention almost exclusively toward Catherine, despite her attempts to fade into the background. His compliments, though elegantly phrased, carried undertones that made her increasingly uncomfortable. "Tell me, Miss Northcott," he said, as the ladies prepared to withdraw, leaving the gentlemen to their port, "do you find life as a companion fulfilling? Surely a woman of your obvious refinement was destined for more traditional satisfactions." "I find great satisfaction in useful employment, my lord," Catherine replied coolly, "and in choosing my own path." "How delightfully modern," Lord Hartley remarked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "though I wonder if the path you've chosen offers sufficient warmth." The Duke set down his glass with an audible thud. "Perhaps we might save philosophy for another time, Hartley. Miss Northcott, I believe my sister is waiting." Catherine gladly escaped to the drawing-room, where Lady Sophia was already arranging the card table. "What a charming man, Lord Hartley," Sophia sighed. "So attentive, and heir to one of the oldest earldoms in England. A pity he seems rather taken with you, Catherine, when he would make such a perfect match for me." "I assure you, Lady Sophia, I have no designs on Lord Hartley's attention," Catherine said firmly. "Nor would I welcome it." "No, how extraordinary. Most women in your position would leap at the chance to secure such an admirer." "I am not most women," Catherine replied, keeping her tone light despite the sting of the words, "your position." "No, indeed," agreed Sophia, shuffling the cards. "Alexander mentioned you refused some dreadful marriage your father arranged. I can't decide if that shows admirable spirit or foolish pride." "Perhaps both," Catherine conceded with a small smile, echoing the Duke's assessment from their first meeting. The gentlemen joined them shortly, and the evening progressed with cards and conversation. When at last Catherine excused herself, pleading a headache, Lord Hartley rose as well. "I shall escort you, Miss Northcott. These old houses can be so confusing in the dark." "That won't be necessary," Catherine began. "I insist," Lord Hartley said, offering his arm. Reluctantly, Catherine accepted, aware of the Duke's narrowed gaze following them from the room. In the dimly lit corridor, Lord Hartley's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm, his fingers caressing her wrist in a manner that could not be mistaken for propriety. Catherine attempted to withdraw her hand. "My lord, you forget yourself." "On the contrary, my dear Miss Northcott, I am thinking very clearly." He drew her toward an alcove, partially concealed by heavy drapes. "A woman of your beauty should not waste herself as a glorified servant. I could offer you so much more." "I am not interested in your offers, Lord Hartley," Catherine said firmly, pulling away. He caught her wrist, his grip tightening painfully. "Come now. We both know women in your circumstances cannot afford such pride. A comfortable establishment in town, fine clothes, protection, surely that's preferable to dependency on Ashbourne's charity." Catherine's blood ran cold as his meaning became unmistakable. "You insult me, sir," Release me at once. Don't play the innocent. You can't expect me to believe a woman who fled her own home to escape marriage has such delicate sensibilities. The lady asked you to release her, Hartley. The Duke's voice, cold as steel, came from behind them. Lord Hartley dropped Catherine's wrist as if burned and stepped back. Ashbourne, just having a friendly chat with Miss Northcott. So I observed. The Duke's expression was terrifying in its control. Miss Northcott, please return to your chamber. Hartley and I have matters to discuss. Catherine didn't need to be told twice. She hurried down the corridor, the sound of the Duke's low, menacing voice fading behind her. If you ever so much as look in her direction again. In her room, Catherine paced, shaken by the encounter and mortified that the Duke had witnessed her humiliation. After perhaps half an hour, a soft knock at her door startled her. Miss Northcott, the Duke's voice, may I speak with you a moment? Catherine opened the door, conscious of her dishevelment and the impropriety of receiving him in her chamber, even with the door ajar. Your Grace, I must apologize. You have nothing to apologize for, he interrupted, his expression grave. Hartley has left Thornfield. He will not trouble you again. Thank you, she said simply. The Duke hesitated, then continued. I fear his behavior may have been partly my fault. I may have implied certain things about your circumstances that led him to draw erroneous conclusions. Catherine's eyes widened. You discussed my situation with him. Not explicitly, but I mentioned you had fled an unwanted marriage, and Hartley, being the man he is, assumed. He stopped, clearly uncomfortable. I should have been more discreet. Yes, you should have. Catherine found her voice trembling with hurt and anger. My history is not yours to share, Your Grace, not even in hints and implications. What Lord Hartley inferred about my character, based on your revelations, reflects poorly on your judgment, not mine. The Duke's jaw tightened. You're right, of course. I apologize unreservedly. Apology accepted. Catherine's hands twisted in her skirts. But perhaps this incident highlights the precariousness of my position here. If even your close friends assume I am a woman of questionable virtue because of my circumstances. No, the single syllable was sharp. You will not allow Hartley's behavior to drive you from Thornfield. My sister values your companionship, Clara adores you, and I— He stopped abruptly. You what, Your Grace? His eyes met hers, intense and unreadable. I gave you my word that you would have sanctuary here. I do not break my promises, Miss Northcott. Catherine studied his face, the rigid control, the flicker of something unnamed in those blue eyes, and felt a dangerous warmth spreading through her chest. Very well, she said softly. I shall remain, but we must be more circumspect to avoid further misunderstandings. Agreed. He stepped back, formal once more. Good night, Miss Northcott. Good night, Your Grace. Catherine closed the door, leaning against it, as her heartbeat gradually slowed. She could not afford to dwell on the fierce protectiveness she had glimpsed in the Duke's manner, nor the unexpected pain she had felt at the thought that he might have carelessly exposed her history. Such feelings could only lead to disappointment and humiliation. Alexander Everett was her employer, nothing more. That he had defended her honor meant only that he was a gentleman. To read anything more into his actions would be the height of folly. Yet as she prepared for bed, Catherine found herself recalling the intensity of his gaze, the tension in his voice when he said, I gave you my word. Despite her best intentions, something had shifted between them, something that made the careful distance they had maintained increasingly difficult to sustain. The weeks following Lord Hartley's hasty departure brought an unexpected change to Thornfield. The Duke, rather than returning to London as planned, remained in residence, often joining Catherine and Clara for their morning walks or appearing in the library when Catherine sat reading alone in the evenings. These encounters, though seemingly casual, left Catherine increasingly unsettled. She found herself anticipating his presence, noticing details she should not. The way sunlight caught in his dark hair, the rare smile that transformed his austere features, the gentleness with which he treated his young niece. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Catherine sat sketching in the garden, the Duke appeared on the gravel path, returning from a ride. He hesitated, then approached, removing his hat. "Good afternoon, Miss Northcott." "Capturing our humble gardens for posterity." Catherine closed her sketchbook self-consciously. "Attempting to, Your Grace, though I warned you my drawing skills are limited." "May I?" He held out a hand for the book. Reluctantly, Catherine surrendered it. The Duke studied her rough sketch of the rose garden, his expression thoughtful. "You underestimate yourself," he said finally. "There's genuine feeling in this work, if not technical perfection." "You're too kind." "Hardly my reputation." He returned the sketchbook, their fingers brushing momentarily. "Miss Northcott, I wonder if you might accompany me on a short walk. There's a matter I wish to discuss." Curious despite her wariness, Catherine agreed. They strolled in silence for several minutes, following a path that led away from the house toward a small ornamental lake. "I received a letter from London this morning," the Duke said at last. "From your father." Catherine stumbled, and his hand shot out to steady her. "My father? How did he know where to find me?" "It seems Lady Harrington mentioned your presence here in correspondence with a London acquaintance. Word eventually reached your father." "And what did he say?" Catherine asked, her voice tight. The Duke's expression darkened. "He demands your immediate return, claiming you left against his wishes and in defiance of your duty as a daughter. He also mentions a misunderstanding regarding Lord Bartley, suggesting the engagement was never formalized." "That's a lie," Catherine said flatly. "The marriage settlements were drawn up. Lord Bartley had already paid part of my dowry." "I believed as much." The Duke hesitated. "Your father further implies that failing your return, he will circulate rumors concerning your moral character." Catherine felt sick. Of course he would. A daughter who defies her father's will must be portrayed as depraved, lest other young women get similar ideas. "I have no intention of forcing you to return," the Duke assured her. "But I thought you should know the threat exists." They reached the lake's edge, where a small stone bench offered a view across the water. Catherine sank onto it, suddenly weary. "What will you do?" she asked. "If my father spreads such tales, it will reflect poorly on your household to have employed me." The Duke remained standing, his profile etched against the autumn sky. "I care nothing for gossip, Miss Northcott, but I am concerned for you. Such rumors could destroy any future prospects for respectable employment or marriage." "I have no interest in marriage," Catherine said, more sharply than she intended. "Not after what my father attempted." "Never," the Duke turned to look at her, something unreadable in his expression. "You condemn the institution entirely based on one man's mercenary intentions." "Not the institution," Catherine clarified. "Merely my participation in it. I have seen how easily a woman becomes property, to be bartered and traded at men's convenience. I will not subject myself to such a fate." "Not all marriages are business arrangements, Miss Northcott." "Perhaps not. But all marriages place a woman under her husband's control, legally and financially. I have tasted independence now, Your Grace. I find I prefer it to subjugation, however gilded the cage might be." A strange smile touched his lips. "My aunt said something remarkably similar once. She might have lived very differently had she met a man worthy of her surrender." "And did she meet such a man?" "Yes," he said quietly, "though fate denied them happiness together." The personal revelation, so uncharacteristic of the usually reserved Duke, startled Catherine into silence. For a moment, they simply gazed at each other, the autumn breeze stirring fallen leaves around their feet. "What would you have me do about your father?" the Duke asked finally. Catherine straightened her shoulders. "Nothing, Your Grace. This is my battle to fight. I disagree. As long as you remain under my protection, any attack on your character is an insult to my household. Your protection, Catherine echoed. I am your employee, not your ward. You are my aunt's goddaughter and my sister's companion, he countered. Both positions entitle you to my protection. Catherine rose from the bench, needing to move to think. I cannot hide at Thornfield forever, nor can I expect you to defend me indefinitely against my own father's malice. What alternative do you propose? I don't know, she admitted. Perhaps I should seek a position elsewhere, somewhere my father's influence doesn't reach. Running away solves nothing, the Duke said firmly. Besides, where would you go that your father's letters couldn't follow? No, Miss Northcott. The solution is not to flee, but to face this challenge directly. And how do you suggest I do that? I have no funds, no influence, no power to counter his threats. You have me, the Duke said simply. The words hung in the air between them, laden with implications Catherine dared not examine too closely. Your Grace, I cannot accept. Cannot accept what? My assistance, my resources, or the fact that I care what happens to you? Catherine stared at him, pulse racing at the intensity of his gaze. All of the above, she whispered. Too bad, the ghost of a smile touched his lips. You're stuck with all three. Before she could formulate a response, he continued. I propose to write to your father, informing him that you remain at Thornfield as my honored guest and my aunt's goddaughter. I will make it clear that any attack on your reputation will be met with the full force of my influence, which, I assure you, far exceeds his own. He will be furious. Let him be, the Duke's voice hardened. Men like Edwin Northcott respect only power and consequence. I have both in abundance. Catherine shook her head, torn between gratitude and discomfort. Why would you do this for me? The simplest solution would be to dismiss me and wash your hands of the entire matter. The simplest solution is rarely the right one. He stepped closer, close enough that Catherine could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. As for why? Perhaps I have my own reasons for despising men who view women as commodities to be traded. Something in his tone, personal, almost raw, made Catherine bold. What reasons, Your Grace? For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, softly, my mother was sold into marriage to my father to save her family from ruin. She spent 20 years in gilded misery before death released her. His eyes held Catherine's. I swore I would never participate in such a transaction, nor stand idly by while another woman suffered a similar fate. I'm sorry, Catherine whispered. Don't be. Her suffering shaped my principles. He stepped back, formal once more. I'll write to your father today. In the meantime, continue as you have been. Show no fear. Thornfield is your home for as long as you wish it to be. With that, he bowed and strode back toward the house, leaving Catherine to wonder at the complexities of a man who guarded his emotions so carefully, yet revealed such unexpected depths of feeling. That evening, as Catherine helped Clara with her needlework in the drawing-room, Lady Sophia entered in a flurry of expensive silk and French perfume. Catherine, the most extraordinary thing. Alexander tells me he's invited your father to visit Thornfield. Did you know? Catherine's hands stilled on her embroidery. No, my lady, I was not aware. He says it's high time the estrangement between you was healed. Sophia settled onto the sofa, arranging her skirts. Though I must say, from what little Alexander has told me of the man, I can't imagine why you'd want reconciliation, trying to marry you off to old Lord Bartley. Positively medieval. Indeed, Catherine managed, her mind racing. The Duke had said nothing of inviting her father to Thornfield. What game was he playing? When the Duke himself entered a short time later, Catherine waited only until Lady Sophia became engrossed in conversation with Clara before approaching him at the window. You invited my father here, she asked in a low voice, after everything I've told you. The Duke glanced down at her, his expression unreadable in the candlelight. I thought it best to confront the situation directly. Your father will arrive next week. Without consulting me. This is my life, Your Grace, not some chess game where you can move the pieces as you please. Chess is precisely what it is, Miss Northcott. Your father threatened to expose you to scandal. I have countered by bringing him into my territory, where my influence outweighs his. And what do you hope to accomplish? My father will not suddenly transform into a caring parent who respects my wishes. Perhaps not, but he will understand that you are under my protection and that any attempt to damage your reputation will have consequences. Your protection, Catherine repeated. You keep using that phrase, as if it grants you authority over my decisions. Something flashed in the Duke's eyes, frustration perhaps, or something deeper. Not authority, responsibility. There's a difference. A semantic one, at best. Catherine fought to keep her voice level. I agreed to employment in your household, Your Grace, not to surrender my autonomy. And have I asked you to surrender anything? Have I demanded your obedience or compliance in any matter beyond the duties of your position? You invited my father to Thornfield without so much as a word to me. To protect you, he insisted. To control the situation, she countered. They stared at each other, tension vibrating between them. Finally, the Duke exhaled slowly. Perhaps I should have consulted you, he conceded. But the letter is sent, and your father has accepted. We must make the best of it. Catherine knew she was defeated. Very well. But I want your word that you will not make decisions regarding my future without my knowledge again. You have it, he said quietly. Though I maintain, I acted with your best interests at heart. The road to hell, Your Grace, Catherine murmured, is paved with good intentions. A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. Tâchez, Miss Northcott. Now shall we join the others before my sister begins to speculate about the nature of our tête-à-tête. The week leading up to Edwin Northcott's arrival passed in a haze of tension for Catherine. She alternated between anger at the Duke's high-handedness and grudging appreciation for his willingness to confront her father directly. The day itself dawned grey and blustery, matching Catherine's turbulent mood. She dressed with particular care in her most severe gown of navy blue, her hair arranged in a simple but elegant knot at the nape of her neck. Armor, of a sort, against the coming confrontation. She was in the library, ostensibly reading, but in truth watching the driveway through the window when her father's carriage appeared. The sight of the familiar Northcott crest sent a chill through her veins. He's here, she said aloud, though she was alone, or thought she was. Yes, came the Duke's voice from the doorway. Are you ready, Miss Northcott? Catherine turned to find him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. As ready as one can be to face a man who tried to sell one to the highest bidder. The Duke crossed the room to stand beside her at the window. Below, Edwin Northcott was descending from the carriage, his portly figure encased in an expensive but slightly outdated traveling coat. Remember, the Duke said quietly, you are not alone in this. Whatever your father says or does, I am with you. The simple declaration steadied her. Thank you, Your Grace. Alexander, he said suddenly. Under the circumstances, I think you might call me Alexander, at least in private. Catherine looked up at him, startled by the unexpected intimacy. That would hardly be proper. Propriety be damned, he muttered. We're about to face your father together. I think we're beyond standing on ceremony. A reluctant smile touched her lips. Very well, Alexander. His name felt strange on her tongue, yet somehow right. He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his austere features, and offered his arm. Shall we greet our guest, Catherine? The sound of her given name in his deep voice sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. She placed her hand on his arm, drawing strength from his solid presence. We shall. They descended to the entrance hall just as Parker was admitting Edwin Northcott. Catherine's father stopped short at the sight of his daughter on the Duke's arm, his florid face darkening. "Catherine," he said stiffly, "so this is where you've hidden yourself." "Father," she acknowledged with a slight curtsy. "I trust your journey was comfortable." "As comfortable as any journey undertaken to retrieve a disobedient daughter can be." His gaze shifted to the Duke. "Your Grace, I must thank you for informing me of my daughter's whereabouts, though I question the propriety of harboring her without my knowledge." "Mr. Northcott," the Duke replied coolly, "your daughter came to Thornfield as my late aunt's goddaughter, seeking refuge from an untenable situation. Lady Helena had long ago extended an invitation of sanctuary, which I chose to honor." "Most generous," Edwin sneered. "Though one wonders what services Miss Catherine has provided in return for such protection." Catherine flinched at the implication, but before she could respond, the Duke's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm, his grip tightening in silent support. "You forget yourself, sir," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "Miss Northcott is my sister's companion and my honored guest. Any suggestion to the contrary reflects poorly on your understanding of gentlemanly behavior." Edwin had the grace to look momentarily abashed. "I meant no offense, your Grace. A father's concern for his daughter's reputation would be more convincing had you not attempted to barter her to Lord Berkeley," the Duke interrupted. "But we can discuss these matters after you've refreshed yourself from your journey. Parker will show you to your chamber." Dismissed like a schoolboy, Edwin had no choice but to follow the butler up the grand staircase, though the glare he directed at Catherine promised this conversation was far from over. When he was gone, Catherine sagged against the Duke, against Alexander, her composure crumbling. "That went precisely as expected," she said with a humorless laugh. "He hasn't changed at all." Alexander's arm slipped around her waist, steadying her. The gesture was improper, intimate, yet Catherine couldn't bring herself to pull away. "He will not speak to you like that again," Alexander promised, his voice tight with anger. "Not in my house." Catherine looked up at him, suddenly aware of their closeness, of his arm around her waist, of the fierce protectiveness in his blue eyes. Something shifted between them in that moment, something dangerous and exhilarating. "Alexander," she whispered, not quite a question. His gaze dropped to her lips, and for a breathless moment, Catherine thought he might kiss her. Then, with visible effort, he stepped back, releasing her. "Forgive me," he said formally. "That was inappropriate." "Yes," Catherine agreed, though the word tasted like a lie. "We should prepare for dinner." "Indeed," he bowed slightly. "Until this evening, Miss Northcott." The return to formality strung, but Catherine understood its necessity. Whatever had flared between them could not be acknowledged, not with her father in the house, not with her position in the household so precarious. Yet as she ascended the stairs to her chamber, Catherine couldn't deny the truth that had been growing in her heart for weeks. She was falling in love with the Duke of Ashbourne, and nothing could possibly come of it. Dinner that evening was an exercise in strained civility. Edwin Northcott, having recovered his confidence, dominated the conversation with tales of London society and veiled references to Catherine's unfortunate misunderstanding regarding Lord Berkeley. "The poor man was devastated by your abrupt departure, my dear," Edwin said, helping himself to more wine. "He had quite set his heart on you." "He had set his heart on my dowry," Catherine corrected, "which, as I understand it, he had already begun to collect." Lady Sophia gasped. "Mr. Northcott, you didn't actually accept money from the man before the marriage." Edwin's face reddened. A mere advance on what would have been settled upon the marriage, a common enough practice. "Not among gentlemen," Alexander said quietly. Edwin bristled. "I don't recall asking for your opinion on how I conduct my affairs, Your Grace." "When your affairs include attempting to sell your daughter to a man 3 times her age and notorious for his debauched habits, I find I cannot remain silent." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Catherine stared at her plate, mortified yet oddly grateful for Alexander's blunt speaking. "Catherine," her father said finally, his voice dangerously pleasant, "I wonder if you might show me the gardens after dinner. We have much to discuss." "I'm afraid the gardens would be rather dark at this hour," Alexander interjected smoothly. "Perhaps the library would be more suitable. I have some excellent brandy I've been saving for a special occasion." "I have no wish to intrude on a private conversation between father and daughter," Lady Sophia said, rising. "Clara and I shall retire to the drawing-room. Catherine, join us when you can." As the ladies departed, Catherine cast a pleading glance at Alexander, who gave her a reassuring nod. Whatever confrontation awaited with her father, she would not face it alone. In the library, Edwin wasted no time once the brandy was poured and the door closed. "You've made a complete fool of yourself, girl," he spat, dropping all pretense of civility. "Running away like some hysterical child, hiding under the Duke's protection. Do you have any idea of the gossip this has caused?" "Gossip of your making, I suspect," Catherine replied, finding courage in Alexander's steadfast presence beside her. "What tales have you been spreading about your wayward daughter?" "Only that you suffered a nervous collapse brought on by excessive reading and unladylike opinions," Edwin sniffed. "Far kinder than the truth, that you defied your father's authority and rejected an advantageous match out of selfish pride." "Advantageous for whom?" Alexander asked mildly. "Certainly not for Catherine." Edwin rounded on him. "With all due respect, Your Grace, this is a family matter." "Catherine is under my protection," Alexander said, setting down his brandy glass with deliberate care. "That makes it my concern." "Your protection," Edwin repeated, his lips curling in a sneer. "Is that what they're calling it these days? I wonder what society would say if they knew my unmarried daughter was living under the roof of the notorious Duke of Ashbourne." Catherine frowned. "Notorious? What do you mean?" "Your noble protector hasn't told you of his reputation, of the women he's ruined, of his own broken engagement when the lady in question discovered his proclivities." "Enough," Alexander said, his voice deadly quiet. "You've been granted hospitality in my home, Mr. Northcott. Do not abuse it." But Edwin, emboldened by brandy and bitterness, pressed on. "Did you really think I wouldn't investigate the man harboring my daughter? You've quite a colorful history, Your Grace. One might almost think you collected ruined women as a hobby." Catherine looked between the two men, her father flushed with malicious triumph, and Alexander, his face a mask of cold fury. "Whatever you've heard about the Duke," she said to her father, "is irrelevant to my situation. I came to Thornfield because Lady Helena was my godmother, not because of any improper arrangement." "So you say," Edwin scoffed. "But the fact remains, you've placed yourself in a compromising position. Your reputation is in tatters. No decent man will have you now." "That was rather the point," Catherine replied coolly. "I have no desire to be had by any man, decent or otherwise." Edwin slammed his glass down. "Ungrateful girl, after everything I've done for you." "Done for me." Catherine's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. "You tried to sell me to Lord Bartley to pay your gambling debts. I arranged a respectable marriage to a titled gentleman. A marriage that would have secured your future and restored our family's position in society. At the cost of my happiness and dignity." "Happiness?" Edwin spat the word like a curse. "What has happiness to do with marriage? Marriage is business, girl. Always has been, always will be." "Not always," Alexander interjected quietly. "Not for everyone." Edwin turned his contemptuous gaze on the Duke. "I suppose you believe in marrying for love, Your Grace. How charmingly naive for a man of your station." "I believe in choice," Alexander replied, "in mutual respect, in partnership rather than ownership." Pretty words, Edwin sneered, but we both know the world doesn't work that way. Women like Catherine, genteel but without substantial fortune, have but one asset to trade, their breeding and connections. If she refuses to capitalize on that, what's to become of her? She will make her own way, Alexander said firmly. As companion to my sister, as my aunt's goddaughter, as an independent woman of intelligence and character. An old maid, you mean? A dependent, a failure. Catherine flinched at the cruel assessment, but Alexander stepped forward, placing himself between her and her father. Mr. Northcott, I think we've heard quite enough. You're welcome to remain at Thornfield tonight, but I suggest you depart early tomorrow. Catherine will not be returning to London with you. Edwin's face darkened. She is my daughter. She is a grown woman who has made her choice, Alexander countered. You would do well to respect it. And if I don't, if I choose to make public the circumstances of her living arrangements here, then you will find yourself facing not only legal action for slander, but social ostracism from every house that values my good opinion. Alexander's voice was soft but implacable. Your reputation will not survive it, Mr. Northcott, nor will your business interests. The naked threat hung in the air between them. Catherine watched as her father's face cycled through rage, calculation, and finally grudging capitulation. Keep her then, he snarled, but don't come crying to me when she's worn out her welcome and you tire of her. With that parting shot, Edwin stormed from the library, leaving Catherine and Alexander in stunned silence. I should apologize for my father, Catherine said finally, but I fear no apology would be adequate. Alexander turned to her, his expression grave. You owe me no apologies for that man's behavior. No, but I owe you an explanation. She hesitated. What he said about your reputation is largely exaggerated and in some cases entirely fabricated, Alexander interrupted, though not without some basis in truth. Will you tell me? He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. It's not a pleasant story, Catherine. Few true stories are, she replied softly. Alexander crossed to the window, staring out into the darkness for a long moment before speaking. 3 years ago, I was briefly engaged to Lady Arabella Wentworth. The match was arranged by our families, though not entirely against my will. Arabella was beautiful, well-connected, and seemingly agreeable to the marriage. What happened? Catherine prompted when he fell silent. She discovered certain inclinations of mine that she found objectionable. A muscle ticked in his jaw. I believe in honesty between marriage partners, you see. I told her of my mother's unhappy marriage, of my determination never to treat a wife as property, of my desire for a true partnership based on mutual respect. Surely that wasn't objectionable. It was to Arabella. She had been raised to expect a traditional marriage, one where the husband ruled absolutely and the wife obeyed without question. My views seemed dangerously radical to her. His mouth twisted. She broke the engagement, claiming I harbored unnatural ideas about marriage. Her family spread rumors that I had strange requirements for a wife that no decent woman would tolerate. Catherine frowned. That's absurd. Wanting a marriage of equals is hardly scandalous. In certain circles, it is. Alexander turned to face her. Since then, I've developed something of a reputation for avoiding eligible young ladies and their marriage-minded mothers. Society has drawn its own conclusions about why a man of my age and position remains unmarried. And what is the truth? Catherine asked quietly. Why have you never married? Their eyes met across the dimly lit library. Because I have never met a woman who valued her independence as much as I valued mine, he said simply. Until now. Catherine's heart stuttered in her chest. Alexander. I should escort you to the drawing room, he interrupted, his manner suddenly formal again. Lady Sophia will be wondering what's become of you. The moment, whatever it might have been, had passed. Catherine nodded, trying to ignore the confused tangle of emotions in her chest. Relief at her father's defeat, lingering humiliation at his cruel words, and a dangerous, impossible hope kindled by Alexander's last statement. "Of course," she said, accepting his offered arm. "We shouldn't keep her waiting." As they walked in silence toward the drawing room, Catherine wondered if she had imagined the significance of Alexander's words. Surely a duke would not seriously consider a penniless companion as a match, no matter how enlightened his views on marriage might be. Yet as his hand covered hers on his arm, warm and steady, she couldn't quite extinguish the small flame of possibility that had ignited in her heart. Edwin Northcott departed at dawn the next morning, leaving behind only a terse note for Catherine. "You have made your choice. Do not expect further support or acknowledgement from me." Catherine read the note at breakfast, then folded it neatly and set it aside, refusing to let her father's rejection darken what felt like the first day of true freedom. "He's gone then?" Alexander asked from the head of the table, watching her carefully. "Yes, and has formally disowned me, it seems." Catherine managed a small smile. "I find I don't mind as much as I should." "You're better off without such a father," Lady Sophia declared, buttering her toast. "Though I must say, Catherine, the man did provide one useful service." "Oh, what might that be?" "He's made my brother positively ferocious in your defense." Sophia cast a sly glance at Alexander. "I've never seen him quite so invested in a household matter before." Alexander cleared his throat. "Sophia, I believe you mentioned plans to visit Lady Harrington today." Changing the subject, brother dear, how transparent. Sophia smiled sweetly. "Yes, Clara and I will be gone most of the day. You'll have to entertain Catherine yourself." After breakfast, Catherine retreated to the library, seeking the comfort of books to settle her turbulent thoughts. Her father was gone, having relinquished all claim to her. She was truly alone in the world now, dependent entirely on the goodwill of the Duke of Ashbourne, the Duke who had defended her so fiercely. The Duke who claimed to value independence as she did, the Duke whose intense blue eyes haunted her dreams. Miss Northcott. Catherine started, nearly dropping the book in her hands as Alexander's voice came from the doorway. "Your Grace," she acknowledged, reverting to formality in the light of day. "I thought you had estate business this morning." "It can wait." He entered the library, closing the door behind him. "I wanted to ensure you were, well, after last night's confrontation." "I'm perfectly fine," she assured him. "My father's rejection was inevitable from the moment I fled his house. At least now the matter is settled." Alexander studied her face intently. "You're a remarkable woman, Catherine Northcott." "Hardly remarkable," she demurred. "Merely stubborn." "Determined," he corrected. "Principled, brave." Catherine felt a blush rising to her cheeks. "You give me too much credit, Your Grace." "Alexander," he reminded her softly. "And I give you precisely the credit you deserve." He hesitated, then continued. "Which brings me to the matter I wish to discuss." Something in his tone made Catherine's pulse quicken. "Yes, your position here at Thornfield," he began, pacing before the fireplace, "as my sister's companion." Catherine's heart sank. "Have I given dissatisfaction?" "No, quite the contrary." He stopped pacing, turning to face her. "But I find the arrangement increasingly unsuitable." "I see." Catherine fought to keep her voice steady. "If you wish me to seek a position elsewhere." "That's not what I meant." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Catherine had come to recognize as a sign of uncharacteristic nervousness. "I'm making a mess of this." "Of what, exactly?" He took a deep breath. "Catherine, I find that I can no longer maintain the pretense that you are merely my sister's companion or my aunt's goddaughter. The truth is, you have become essential to me." Catherine stared at him, scarcely daring to breathe. "Since you arrived at Thornfield," he continued, I have found myself drawn to you in ways I never anticipated. Your intelligence, your courage, your unwavering principles, they have awakened in me feelings I had long ago resigned myself to never experiencing. Alexander, she whispered, what are you saying? He crossed the room to stand before her, taking her hands in his. I'm saying, quite inelegantly, that I love you, Catherine Northcott. And if you could consider the possibility of loving me in return, I would be honored to offer you my name, my fortune, and my heart. Catherine's mind reeled. You're asking me to marry you. Yes, a smile touched his lips. Though apparently I'm making a poor job of it. But I'm penniless, she protested. Disowned, a mere companion. You are the woman I love, he said simply. The rest is irrelevant. The world will say you married beneath you. The world can go hang. His hands tightened on hers. I want a partner, Catherine, an equal, someone who values independence as I do, who will stand beside me rather than behind me, someone who will challenge me, argue with me, make me a better man than I would be without her. Tears welled in Catherine's eyes. You can't mean it. I have never meant anything more sincerely in my life. Alexander's gaze held hers, open and vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. I understand your reluctance to marry after what your father attempted. I know you value your freedom above all things, but I swear to you, as my wife, you would have more freedom, not less. I would never seek to control or diminish you. And if I refuse, Catherine asked, needing to be certain, would I still have a place here? Of course, he answered without hesitation, though I confess it would break my heart. Catherine searched his face, looking for any sign of deception or calculation. She found only earnest hope and a vulnerability that touched her deeply. I never thought to marry, she said softly. After fleeing my father's house, I swore I would never place myself under any man's authority again. I'm not asking for authority over you, Alexander replied. Only the privilege of standing beside you, facing life's challenges together rather than apart. But legally, as your wife. Legally, you would be the Duchess of Ashbourne, with all the power and protection that title confers. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms. I would ensure separate financial provisions that would remain yours alone, regardless of our marriage's future. You would never again be dependent on anyone's goodwill, not even mine. The thoroughness of his consideration, his understanding of her deepest fears, undid the last of Catherine's resistance. You've thought this through, she murmured. I've thought of little else for weeks. A hesitant smile touched his lips. Catherine, I am not your father. I do not see marriage as a business transaction or a transfer of property. I see it as a sacred partnership between equals who choose each other freely. And you choose me, a penniless companion with a scandal trailing behind her. I choose you, he affirmed, precisely as you are. The question is, do you choose me? Catherine looked into the blue eyes that had haunted her dreams and finally acknowledged the truth she had been fighting for weeks. I do, she whispered. God help me, I do. Alexander's face transformed with such joy that Catherine's breath caught in her throat. Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, he lowered his head and brushed his lips against hers, a feather-light touch that nonetheless sent warmth cascading through her veins. Is that a yes, Miss Northcott? He murmured against her mouth. Catherine smiled, her heart overflowing with a happiness she had never dared to imagine. Yes, Your Grace, she replied. That is most definitely a yes. 3 months later, Catherine stood before the mirror in the bride's chamber at the village church, hardly recognizing the woman who gazed back at her. The Duchess of Ashbourne's wedding gift, a gown of ivory silk trimmed with Brussels lace, transformed her into a vision she scarcely believed was herself. You look beautiful, Miss Catherine, said Mary, who had been brought from London to serve as her lady's maid. His Grace won't know what hit him. I still can't believe this is happening, Catherine confessed. the forgotten daughter of Edwin Northcott marrying the Duke of Ashbourne. Not forgotten anymore, came Lady Sophia's voice from the doorway. And soon to be the most envied woman in England. Catherine turned to find her future sister-in-law beaming at her. Is it time? Nearly. Sophia crossed the room to adjust Catherine's veil. Alexander is pacing the church like a caged lion. I've never seen him so nervous. Nor I, Catherine admitted. Having second thoughts, Sophia asked shrewdly. No, Catherine smiled. Only wondering how I came to be so fortunate. It isn't fortune, Sophia replied. It's character, yours and his. She squeezed Catherine's hands. Now come along. My brother has waited long enough for his duchess. As Catherine walked down the aisle on the arm of Alexander's cousin, who had graciously offered to give her away, she saw only Alexander, standing tall and handsome before the altar, his face transforming with wonder as she approached. When they joined hands before the vicar, he whispered words meant for her alone. The bravest decision I ever made was inviting a forgotten daughter into my home. The wisest was asking her to stay forever. I'm not forgotten anymore, Catherine whispered back. I'm chosen. And as they spoke their vows before God and their assembled guests, Catherine knew that in choosing Alexander, and in being chosen by him, she had found not a cage but a shelter, not a master but a partner. Not an ending but a beginning. The forgotten daughter had finally found her place in the world, not as someone's possession, but as someone's beloved equal.